representation, this is too much pressure, because it is a lot of pressure to kind of come in and try to be representative, or try to help reframe how people see your community. And some days I wish that wasn't my passion and interest. Some days I wish I was like, I should just make another film, another documentary about Marilyn Monroe. That seems to be like something that people like, and probably wouldn't cause as much stress. But that's not what I'm into. And for me, be able to actively work on how to represent Black life in a really nuanced way, and represent the stories of underrepresented communities, is both one of the greatest responsibilities and greatest gifts a community can give you, but also a big burden. So it's kind of why it's a lot of pressure. So I'm going to start here and kind of talk about where I came from. So when I was growing up, and if you're a certain my age as well, this was kind of like your ideal for Black family life on television. I know you're probably like, which one's the Cosby Show? Which one's my family? It's so similar. But this is me and my family on the right, and just like Cosby Show, the same age as Rudy. She was growing up in the show. I had siblings, and I always get along with. We had a mother that was a lawyer, and so for me, I was like, okay, this is amazing. I get to see myself represented in the media. And then that show went off the air, and there was nothing for a while. I mean, not quite nothing, but I didn't see me and my family on television anymore. And the representations I did see of African Americans were through either in the news or music videos, which were very kind of narrowly focused representations of African American life. And they felt like a real absence. So instead, I just had this thought that I guess that's over. I won't see people like me on television again. And so I started kind of consuming media that was equally good, but didn't necessarily look or feel like my story. And I consumed a lot of media. And for me, my inciting incident is that when I was 14, Pulp Fiction was coming out, and I really wanted to see it. So as living in Oak Park, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago, I went to our local movie theater, and I was like, one ticket for Pulp Fiction. And they were like, you are a child. You're not. And I tried to ask adults, hey, can you buy me a ticket? And they were like, no, child. So I was like, fine, I'll buy a ticket for the other film that's playing. And that film happened to be Hoop Dreams. And it was like this epiphany, this transformative moment, like, oh my God, wait, there are images of me that actually are closer to what I see and what I feel and what I experience. That's just in documentary films. I didn't know they're such thing as documentary films. They're not on MTV. Where do you find documentary films? Apparently in the cinema and on PBS. And it was great because not only is Hoop Dreams, one of the best films of all time, not just documentaries, but I knew Arthur. He was playing basketball the same time my brothers were in school. He was a name, so it really was amazing to kind of see a story that I could really relate to on a big screen. And that film kind of helped make me pursue my dream of studying films. Like Matt said, I got my undergrad degree in film studies with a minor in video production. I came out here in 2005, and I started working with underserved communities, particularly at-risk youth in Oakland. This is the very first year I was teaching this program in West Oakland called Youth Sounds before we merged with BAVC. You probably can't tell, but I'm exhausted at that point by these students, but they're amazing. And I came in with my little film studies degree, and I was like, we're gonna watch Frederick Weissman, and we're gonna watch Taxi Driver, and they were not connecting with the material at all. And I just kept being like, how can you not like Taxi Driver? I gave you violence, don't you like that? And then I took them to a community cinema screening of Hip Hop Beyond Beats and Rhymes, which is a film by Byron Hurt. And it was, for them, a transformative experience, the same way that Hoop Dreams was for them. They saw themselves on the screen, they saw things that they cared about, they saw a filmmaker on screen who looked like them and talked like them, and it was amazing. I got a copy of it from a friend, and it got passed along the entire school. The history teacher showed it in her class, the science teacher showed it in her class, the math teacher showed it in her class, because it was even though it was not related to the content, the subject matter of the classes at all, it was one of the only times they can really get their students engaged in conversations. And so that I was like, okay, I really love working with youth, and I still try to do it when I can, but I really want to give that transform experience to someone like me, a youth like me. So I went back to school and got my master's in journalism, focusing on documentary at BAVC, Berkeley Grad School of Journalism. And while there, instead of kind of come up with these kind of rules of engagement on working with underrepresented communities or underserved communities, in particular, you know, in this case, African subject matter. So the rules are as follows. The perspective of underrepresented communities are often ignored or treated as a footnote. These are stories that are the most compelling. Who you are and the relationships you cultivate are a form of currency. So, you know, you may not think that maybe like your relationship with Jason means anything right now, but it could mean a lot later on, right? Don't pick up the camera until you gain some level of trust. And this can be a particularly like painful rule to go by. Luckily, you know, I work in documentary film where it's really about the long haul. It's not like you have to kind of, you know, bust out a story really quickly and get it on the news. And so you really want to take the time to build a trust. And even if that means you miss something great at that moment, by the time you get someone to trust, they really open up and it'll be helpful in the long run. And find out what is important to you, important to your subjects, and include that in the film. As Matt mentioned, I work at ITVS, which stands for Independent Television Service, and my job is actually working directly with filmmakers, you know, deciding who we fund, and work with them to develop their content. And you know, filmmakers are artists, and you know, sometimes I think like I've seen filmmakers say, well, you know, my subject might think this is actually a really important aspect, but I don't really think it is. It feels a little wonky. It feels like a little too insider. I'm not going to include that. But I find that when you kind of dismiss those things for the sake of your story and your vision, you're communicating to subjects and people who are trusting you with your story that your interpretation matters the most and not what's the reality for them. And that's another way you can break trust. So these are kind of rules that I've learned along the way and really helped to influence my work. So one of the things, first thing I want to talk about, the first rule is the perspective of underrepresented communities being treated as footnotes or completely ignored. And I want to talk about a story I did while in grad school, not because it was great, because it's my first year, and there's so many things I'm like, oh, why did I share it that way? But because it continues to have relevance today, and I still get requests from organizations to play it. This is a story about Lavelle Mixon. I don't know if you guys remember him, but in 2009, Lavelle Mixon, young, I think he was like 25-year-old black man, was driving to East Oakland, got stopped by cops, and for some reason, you know, we'll never know, he opened fire and killed, ultimately killing, I believe, 4 or 5 police officers, and then he died as well. And in the midst of that, the aftermath of that, there was an anti-police march after the officers had their funeral. And there's a lot of national coverage, even local coverage, being like, how could the black community do that? Like, that is so offensive and so unfair. Why would they do that? No one understood why. And I was in grad school, and I was the only black person in my class, so of course, my professor was like, Nigel, as a black person, what are you doing? Which you get used to having to do that a lot. And I knew exactly what's the kind of feeling that would lead to a march like that. So I just want to show you a clip of how it's portrayed in national news. Quickly first. Hold on. This is kind of an easy target because it's Bill O'Reilly, but.
A hard look at Oakland, California, where some citizens are celebrating a cop killer. Today, a joint funeral for the 4 officers killed by Lavelle Mixon was held at the Oracle Arena in Oakland. Thousands attended, including police from all over the USA, 3 widows, and 10 fatherless children. Tragedy doesn't begin to describe this. But garbage doesn't even begin to describe this. Scores of protesters supporting the cop killer. What is wrong with these people? Joining us now from San Francisco, the former mayor of that city, Willie Brown, and Bakuri Olatunji, the spokesman for the International People's Democratic Movement, which organized that revolting protest.
Okay, so that's enough of that. But that's how it was portrayed in the media at that time. And so I went and decided to do a story about it. Not because I necessarily agree with what was happening, but it's really important to understand where people's frustration, how do you get to the point of frustration that much that, you know, you're willing to have this march in the wake of these deaths and knowing how it's going to be received.
Young black men don't even have a future. Lavelle Mixon's life was over before that day when he was stopped by those officers.
And I think a lot of the population in America, or I say even the population of the Bay Area, doesn't know what black males in particular go through with the police.
J.R. Valerie is a reporter for KPFA Radio and the SF Bayview, an African-American newspaper. Most recently, he wrote an article about Mixon headlined, Police 2, Oakland Residents 4.
I titled it that so it could reflect the fact that we see him as an occupying army. I mean, there's no difference from the checkpoints in East Oakland and the checkpoints in Iraq.
While Caroline Mixon is still grieving for her cousin, she maintains her support for the police.
Older officers are out to get, every young African-American man that's drive down the street. That's not true. The police is not the enemy. The police officers are here to serve and to protect.
And while that is usually the case, the Oakland Police Department was hit with several scandals in the last year. From officers falsifying warrants to a BART police officer killing an unarmed and restrained Oscar Grant. Each of these incidents has led some in the African-American community to feel the police are targeting them.
They may have been great fathers and great friends to their neighbors in the communities where they live, but when they come to Oakland and they put on that uniform and that gun, they have a different relationship with us in the black community.
Patrick Gonzalez was one of the officers wounded by Mixon. He killed 2 young black males and paralyzed another in a 2-year period. For some, that information validates Mixon's actions.
We forced to look at them in their face when they drive by in their police cars, and they above the law basically in our community. So when Lavelle Mixon settles the score, I mean, we kind of feel like, how does it feel when the rabbit has the gun?
At the time I did this piece, people were really like, this is so eye-opening, I never knew. And it's because they watch the news, and the news doesn't cover, not KQED, of course, but like KTVU, and of course, Bill O'Reilly isn't going to give people the kind of context needed to understand. They don't want you to necessarily understand, and that's why I really feel like in my work, whether I agree with something or not, I want people to understand the context and really understand where we're all coming from. And this is a piece that keeps coming up, because of what's been happening with the Black Lives Matter movement. This also comes up another piece I did called Perry County. There at the time there's this big coal ash spill in Kingston, Tennessee. That before that spill, the Deep Horizon oil spill in the Gulf, was the biggest environmental disaster in the United States. And so there's a ton of print on that and how it affected this white middle-class community. And then it said, like in an article in the New York Times, one line, they will now be moving that coal ash to Perry County, one of the poorest counties in the country. And I was like, I bet you that county is black, and I was right. The thing that happened is that all these news organizations then came and covered Perry County and what was happening there and fight to stop the coal ash. But again, it was like kind of quick and dirty, trying to get the story out and not really fully hearing the residents' concerns. So by the time I went down there to try and do my thesis film, I was getting like roadblock after roadblock. And so that's when it became important to, who I am, the relationships I have is a form of currency. It was a form of currency in that sense. And the thing that really helped me out more than anything else, I couldn't say that I was from Berkeley. Like, you can't go to Deep South and be like, I'm from Berkeley. They're like, I know you are, get out, you hippie. But what helped me is that both sides of my family are from Selma, Alabama, which is 40 miles away. And so I had a co-producer who was this really nice young white man who grew up to the son of 2 doctors in Western Mass, and they'd be like, where are you from? Massachusetts. Oh. And they asked me, where are you from? Selma. Oh, hey, your family. And that opened up so many more doors because of that. This is also a case where I really had to spend a lot of time cultivating relationship and cultivating trust because they felt so burned before by national media. This guy here, you had to talk to someone else to find out what is his secret code in order to get him to call you back. So you had to call him, hang up, let it ring once, hang up, call him again, let it ring once, hang up, call him again, and that's when he would answer. Otherwise, he would not answer the phone because you assume that you're from national media, you don't know him, you don't really want to tell his story. There's another man who was a key part of this film called Reverend Murdoch's Black Preacher. And he was like, I'm not going on camera ever again. So I was like, okay, well, we'll just come to your church service. And my friend, my young white co-producer, was like, come from a Catholic family where Mass was 20 minutes. He's like, well, how long is this going to take? I'm like, oh, we're going to be there for 3 hours. And even then, I had to also write him a letter by hand and put it in the mail. And he didn't understand any of that. And we had to like talk to all these older black residents who live alongside of a landfill that, you know, toxic coal ash waste was being put in. And you have to go and visit and sit a spell. And he'd be like, oh, we're going to be out here in 20 minutes, right? I'm like, nope. This is a long process. This is going to be like 2 hours of talking about their kids, their grandkids, their nieces, their nephews. Look at what, you know, the Lord's Prayer they, you know, or, you know, whatever it is, you had to spend that time. But it ended up being really worthwhile. I'm not going to show the trailer because I'm running short on time. But you can look at it online. And then this is also what's really important. Find out what's important to your subjects and include that in the film. So for Perry County, people really want to get out the fact, and I want to also get out the fact that, you know, the kind of the villain in the film is a county commissioner who uses his father's civil rights legacy to get into power and then kind of make things happen, like kind of for his own good, but not for the good of the county. And what became clear, and where we spend time in the South, is that a lot of times, you know, after civil rights, the power structure kind of shifted from white people power to black people power, but really that's the only shift that there was. And so the people who felt oppressed and not appreciated and felt kind of, you know, downtrodden and taken advantage of, that didn't change once black people came in power. And so that's one of the things that we really had to make sure that came out in the film. That's what the residents wanted. They also wanted, you know, to really reinforce that the environmental justice movement, that also sprung out of the South. Because what happens is that everyone wants to put their toxic waste in these poor black rural communities in the South. And there really is an intimate connection between the civil rights movement in the South and the environmental justice movement. For First Friday, which is a film that Matt mentioned earlier that I've been working on for since 2013, we really wanted to get the perspectives of a variety of residents from Oakland. And so we made sure we got a youth who attends the event, Casey Castro, who is, you know, really represents someone who's from Oakland and is transgender, but really proud that we have the first documentary of characters transgender, and that's not really talked about or made a big deal of. James Copes, who grew up in Oakland and is one of the organizers and vendor. Dan and Sean, who recently moved to Oakland and are, you know, on the outside look just like gentrifiers, but actually have a deeper connection to the city. Lynette Nubblehaney, who is a councilwoman there, and that's her district is where First Friday takes place. Patricia Williams, who is, her family moved here during the Great Migration. And even though First Friday happens on her block, she is one of the black residents that feels like when she goes out at First Friday once a month, she's constantly asked, who are you and why are you here? Even though she's been there before First Friday ever began. And Luke Reckie-Meissner, who is a teacher, an educator, and a third-generation Oaklander, whose family, you know, lived in East Oakland for generations and were one of the few white families that didn't flee. So our approach to telling these stories is that we had a dedicated crew to each of these characters. We did pre-interviews, we wrote like extensive dossiers of the characters, so every crew knew who these people were and what their perspectives are, and that's what's really important to tell their story. And then our secret weapon is this guy here, Brian Burchett, who is a BAVC next-gen grad and born and raised in East Oakland. And, you know, although I've lived in Oakland for 10 years, I'm not a resident. And you need, you know, I need someone on my team who can really rep that and really validate that and let us know during cuts if we're getting it right or if we're getting it wrong. The other thing is that one other character we have is someone who's a voice of Oakland. And we have a narrator, kind of less objective narrator, sort of like the films of Terrence Malick and Chris Marker, who can kind of speak to Oakland and to our characters. And I'll just wrap up by saying, we're in post-production right now. We're really close to Latin Picture. We're hoping to premiere at the San Francisco International Film Festival. And I'm constantly asked, when can I see it? When can I see it? And again, it's a lot of pressure. But I know it's because, people have been wanting and really craving a film about Oakland that truly reflects the experience of living in Oakland. And just, I hope it's a pressure that we can live up to. That's it.